Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of The Great Ruler Season 2 Part 20 based on novel. So let's start. A resonant and clear cry rang across the world as countless gazes looked in shock at the giant black bird that had surfaced from within the torrential black flames across the horizon. As the giant bird unfurled its giant wings that could encompass mountains, black flames surged and swept out, causing the temperature of this stretch of the world to rise even higher. The Nine Netherbird. Shen Sangsheng and Li Xiantong looked at each other, noticing the astonishment within each other's eyes, as they mutter, "He is actually able to transform into a spiritual beast form even at this level." Everyone knew that once one steps into the spirit stage, everyone would possess a power, and that was to refine the soul essence of spiritual beasts. It's exactly this power of the soul essence that allowed spirit stage experts to possess the might of spiritual beasts. However, from a certain perspective, this kind of possession wasn't eternal, as even the soul essence of the spiritual beast would one day dissipate. Furthermore, following the increasing strength of the refiner, gradually breaking through from spirit stage to heavenly fusion stage and heavenly transformation stage, the power gained from refining the spiritual beast's soul essence would gradually be replaced. Naturally, not all of the refined spiritual beast's soul essence would dissipate. If one was able to reach a considerably high level of fusion with their spiritual beast's soul essence, the power gained from the soul essence would continue to exist. However, for that kind of situation to occur was not simple. After all, the spiritual beast's soul essence had a natural rejection to mankind. Even though the spiritual beast was already killed, its remnant thoughts would still resist this fusion. That is, unless they were willing to get refined. Only if this were to happen would the power from the soul essence be able to follow alongside the refiner. However, with untamed and arrogant spiritual beasts, after being killing, would they be willing to be refined? Therefore, following the increase in strength of people, after breaking through to heavenly fusion stage, heavenly transformation stage and heavenly completion stage, the spiritual beast's soul essence present within them would gradually dissipate. This kind of power from the soul essence would gradually be replaced by an even more powerful strength. This was the reason why Shen Sangsheng and Li Xiantong had shown such astonishment when Mu Chen transformed into the shape of the Nine Netherbird, and, in addition, into such a complete form. I truly don't know exactly how Mu Chen was able to reach such a point of fusion with the Nine Netherbird soul essence. Shen Sangsheng smiled in startlement, before saying, "Over these last few years, this is the first time I've seen someone who was able to transform into such a perfect form of the Nine Netherbird." Li Xiantong slightly nodded his head in approval, as he looked towards the incomparably large Nine Netherbird. At this moment, a complicated expression arose on his face, since the current Mu Chen truly had a monumental change since a number of months ago. He's too formidable. He's actually able to transform into such a perfect form of the Nine Netherbird at this moment. On the ground, Wang Tong and the rest were also exclaiming in astonishment. All of them had also refined the soul essence of spiritual beasts that were not weak while they were at the spirit stage. However, once they promoted into the heavenly transformation stage, the power from their spiritual beast soul essence had seemingly completely dissipated, without even talking about being able to completely transform into such a perfect form of their spiritual beasts. In addition, when the power of the soul essence was most abundant within their bodies, they were still unable to transform into such a spiritual beast form that was as substantial as a living creature. Standing beside them, Luo Li gave a faint smile. She naturally knew about how Mu Chen was able to achieve such a step. Not only did he have a high-level agreement with the Nine Netherbird within him, even their lives were intertwined. The bloodline bond wasn't something that just anyone could enjoy, as well as having the courage to be tied in one. To many people, the power from the soul essence might be considered to be a provisional power source. However, for Mu Chen, it would be with him throughout his life. Screech! Under the countless gazes that were sparkling with various kinds of emotions, the gigantic black bird that covered the horizon raised its head towards the sky and gave a long screech. In the next instant, flapping its wings, it smashed, head first, into the blood-red full moon that had shattered space as it headed towards Mu Chen. Bang! The two frightening powers smashed against each other. The intense bang produced was akin to thunder, resounding across the skies, even causing a slight twist and distortion in the space. The giant bird, burning in black flames, smashed head-on against the blood-red full moon. The two frightening powers were currently crazily trying to corrode one another. Bang! Bang! The incomparably erratic spiritual energy fluctuations were akin to 100-meter-high waves that were continuously sweeping and trying to engulf the territory of the other. The scene that they created caused the skin of quite a few people on the ground to feel numb. Everyone was able to see a black and red color condensing in the erratic corrosion that was happening between the giant bird and the full moon. In the short span of a number of breaths, these two powers turned into a gigantic ball of light that was over 100 meters in diameter. Within the center of the ball of light, the two forces were erratically mixing in an extreme fashion. Like a bomb. Since it was a bomb, it would explode. As this thought flashed past the minds of the crowd, they noticed that the black and red color was expanding in the sky. In the next moment, an astonishing sound rang out. Boom! The spiritual energy ball of light that had condensed from the all-out attacks of the two finally could not hold onto its shape and furiously exploded. Spiritual energy crazily swept out as the gigantic black bird, as well as the full moon, were instantly engulfed within it. A dazzling light formed, causing countless people to narrow their eyes. A spiritual energy shockwave, approximately thousands of meters in length, radiated out, before finally diffusing into the ends of the horizon. At this instant, the spiritual light mountain, which was akin to a giant pillar that held the sky up, started to hum as it vibrated and shook. Bang! Bang! Under the buffeting from the devastating spiritual energy storm, a black and a red streak of light were violently flung out, before heavily impacting the expansive platform on the ground below. Boom! As the earth shook, the 1,000-meter-long stone platform started to collapse as two deep holes appeared on it. Large and coarse cracks, spanning thousands of meters, appeared like spider webs as they extended from the giant holes. Figures started to hurriedly rise into the air from all around the stone platform as they cast their gazes over. In the previous heaven-shattering collision, exactly who had gained an advantage? Everyone was clear that this exchange was sufficient to determine the winner. Under the convergence of countless gazes, the dust clouds slowly dissipated from the completely destroyed stone platform. Two unfathomably deep giant holes started to appear in the eyes of the crowd. The jet blackness of the deep holes masked every source of light and gaze. Exactly who had won? Within the depths of the dark giant hole, a whooshing sound suddenly rang out, causing the crowd to hurriedly converge their gazes over. In the next instant, they saw, from the left deep hole, a figure that was covered in blood was staggering as he rose to the sky. The figure had a head full of green hair while the injuries were present over his entire body. Blood created a pattering sound as it dripped down from him, causing him to appear extremely miserable. It was Hi Yao. A few regretful clamoring noises rang out as everyone thought, so, it's still Hi Yao that remains standing in the end? The lovable faces of Su Linga and the rest who were attentively watching this scene before them could not resist and changed. Ha 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 ha. Covered in blood, Hi Yao looked at the deep hole before him that did not appear to have the slightest activity. In the next moment, he looked at the sky and laughed loudly, his facial features distorted as he roared, "Mu Chen, aren't you very proud of yourself?" However, the one that laughs, at the end, is me. There were several people who were sighing regretfully as they thought, is Mu Chen still weaker? However, since he was able to force Hi Yao into such a miserable state, he could be considered as being extremely outstanding already. As long as some time was given to him, surpassing Hi Yao might only be a matter of time. In the air, the faces of Shen Sangsheng and Li Xiantong were still tranquil and calm. As they shot a look at the deep hole that did not have the slightest trace of activity, a faint smile suddenly appeared on their faces. Screech! A clear and resonantly long screech suddenly resounded across the skies at that moment. Instantly, all of the clamoring noises turned silent as thick surprise and joy radiated from the gazes that were showing regret earlier, and they looked towards the deep hole that did not have the slightest bit of activity. At this instant, Hi Yao's face had also violently contorted. The earth faintly trembled as a scorching heat wave rose from within the depths of the giant hole. In the next instant, everyone saw erupting black flames that blotted the skies. Within the black flames, a gigantic black bird rushed towards the sky as its shadow covered the earth. Boom! Across the horizon, the black flames erupted as the giant bird clad in black flames slowly flapped its giant wings. A pair of incomparably sharp eyes stared at the dumbfounded Hi Yao. At this moment, the disparity of strength between the two could be seen with a single look. "How's this possible?" muttered Hi Yao as he looked towards the nine-nether bird that seemed to not have a single trace of injury. That was his strongest attack. However, from the looks of it, it unexpectedly did not do much damage to Mu Chen. As the black flames swept out, the gigantic body of the nine-nether bird started to rapidly shrink. Under the shocked and astonished gazes of the people on the ground, it transformed into a thin figure. After Mu Chen reappeared, his face seemed somewhat pale, however, his black eyes were still shining with consciousness. Compared to Hi Yao, his condition was much better. Hi Yao's previous attack truly was incomparably tyrannical, however, he still underestimated the completely transformed nine-nether bird, and Mu Chen, who had possessed such strong resilience and defensive capabilities. The form of the nine-nether bird truly was much more tyrannical than the body of a human. "Hi Yao, you're celebrating too early. That isn't a good thing to do," said Mu Chen with a faint smile as he looked towards the extremely miserable Hi Yao. "I don't believe it. The current you is just spent force. Give me less of your pretentious appearance." The capillaries in Hi Yao's eyes bulged as he malevolently roared. In the next instant, he explosively shot towards Mu Chen. Looking at the incoming Hi Yao, regardless of speed, attack, or strength, which had decreased too much, Mu Chen's eyes turned emotionless. With a flick of his finger, a spiritual energy ray howled as it surged out, and heavily impacted the body of Hi Yao. Bang! Hi Yao instantly flew backwards, and miserably scraped the ground as he fell. Long cracks extended out from the location where he fell as he spurted a mouthful of blood. At this instant, Mu Chen's eyes turned frosty. Without the slightest shred of mercy, he flicked his finger once again, causing another spiritual energy ray to sweep out. Under the terror-filled eyes of Hi Yao, it violently impacted against his body. Bang! This stretch of earth trembled from the impact. A ray of light descended from the sky and encompassed Hi Yao within. With a whoosh, it sent him, who was already unable to move, out of the hunting grounds. Seeing Hi Yao disappearing into the distance, Mu Chen raised his head and deeply exhaled, while the paleness of his face turned increasingly thick. This fight was not easy for him. However, fortunately, he had won in the end. After Hi Yao was sent out, the region turned deathly silent as everyone cast their gazes towards the pale-faced youth. Within their eyes, a sliver of respect started to slowly erupt. In the air, Shen Sangsheng and Li Xiantong both started to smile. Looks like the third slot had been won by Mu Chen, in the end. The astonishing battle that happened in the air finally had an ending, while the vast spiritual light platform had already collapsed and was destroyed at this point in time. The two deep holes had taken up close to half of the surface of the platform, while the scary webs of cracks extending out caused them to look all the more chilling. There was still a sea of humans that covered the mountains and the plains around the stone platform. However, the sea of humans was still in a quiet state, most likely still reminiscing the astonishing confrontation that happened in the air. Countless gazes locked onto the figure of the youth standing in the air above them, with some having respect in their eyes. If Mu Chen had previously made people assume that he was just a freshman, after this fight, it had truly made him into an influential figure of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. On the heavenly rankings, he was sufficiently capable of being placed within the top 3 ranks. This kind of accomplishment made quite a few people sigh in amazement. One had to know that Mu Chen had entered the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy for, at most, half a year. However, the growth he had during this half year had caused shock and astonishment to people. Such an innate gift, such a monstrous talent. Mu Chen's won. Unconcealable joy and happiness erupted on Su Ling's lovable face as she grabbed onto Su Xian's smooth wrist, while exclaiming out in excitement. Beside her, both Li Qing and Guo Xiong had started to laugh while looking at the youth in the air with some complicated expressions in their eyes. They thought, ever since we returned 2 months ago, this fellow's strength has already improved to such a level. Su Xian had also shown a gentle smile as she cast her beautiful eyes, with a little peculiarity, at Mu Chen. Even she had never thought that Mu Chen would actually be able to defeat Hi Yao. After all, regardless of Mu Chen's talent, Hi Yao was still a veteran amongst the influential characters at the apex of the academy. "Looks like my third rank on the heavenly rankings will have to be given up," muttered Su Xian with a soft laugh. She did not have any unwillingness, since she did not have any particular care about it. If not for Hi Yao being too much of a bully, she might have even been too lazy to put up a fight. In the distance, Wang Tong and the rest had also taken a deep breath of relief, before looking at the figure in the air, while smacking their lips. At this moment, the gazes they sent out had faint traces of change. When they had known that Mu Chen and Luo Li had slain that Spirit King, although they had some astonishment and admiration, it was still not as strong and intense as the feelings they got at this moment. After all, Hi Yao was an influential figure at the apex within the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Within the academy, the only people who could suppress him would be Shen Songsheng or Li Xiantong. However, there appeared a third person who could accomplish that. Furthermore, he was a freshman. The shock and astonishment that this brought forth far exceeded that of when Mu Chen had slain a Spirit King. Although Hi Yao's strength wasn't any stronger than the Spirit King. "Since Mu Chen has defeated Hi Yao, he will be awarded the third spot," said and ran suddenly. Upon hearing this, the expressions of Wang Tong and the rest turned grave, as they casted their slightly fearful gazes at the majestic mountain summit that was encapsulated by clouds. On the peak of that mountain were the final protectors of this hunt. They were the three great generals of the punishment hall. They were strong existences that even the overlord of the heavenly rankings, Shen Songsheng, had to show extreme dread. If they were unable to pass the checkpoint of the three great generals, all of the hard work that they had put in during the period of time in the hunting grounds would be all for naught. At this time, Luo Li's clear eyes had also faintly contracted. She was very clear that those three held the strongest places within the entirety of the students. This represented a kind of glory, while at the same time, they also represented a gigantic pressure. The hunt was something that was anticipated by all the students throughout the year. As well as putting in hard work, they were willing to endure the loneliness of bitter training. All of this was to astonish people within the hunt and to obtain spiritual lights in the end, because the spiritual light empowerment was what made people drool. However, the three great protectors in front of them had become a giant mountain in front of all the students. They were unable to cross it and could only entrust their hopes on the shoulders of Shen Songsheng, Li Xiantong, as well as Mu Chen, who had just obtained the final spot. Similarly, following this kind of anticipation, the pressure was also present. Seemingly, the anticipation felt by all of the students that had participated in this hunt had transformed into a kind of pressure, pressing down on the bodies of the three. If the three were able to obtain victory against the three great protectors in the end, they would obtain the prestige from all of the students in the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, which would reach the apex. They would also gain true respect and gratefulness from all of them. This was the glory that the victor should enjoy. However, what if they lose? This anticipation would turn into disappointment. What kind of impact would that lead for everyone? Luo Li gently clenched her jade-like hands as she stared at Mu Chen's figure with some graveness present in her eyes. The third spot wasn't something that was good to receive. As Luo Li's gaze started to fluctuate, Shen Songsheng and Li Xiantong proceeded to descend from the sky, finally stopping beside Mu Chen. The both of them shot a peculiar look at the latter, sizing him up before saying with a smile, "Congratulations on defeating Hi Yao. However, we have to similarly inform you that the third spot had descended on your shoulders. I think that you should know what it represents. This isn't some terrific achievement." Upon hearing their words, Mu Chen faintly hesitated before gently nodding his head. He naturally knew how gigantic the pressure was to possess this third spot. If he was defeated, he would gain too much disappointment from the students, and it would lead to all the efforts of everyone to go down the drain. From the ground, Luo Li shot over and appeared beside Mu Chen. She shot a look at Shen Songsheng and Li Xiantong with her beautiful eyes, without saying a single word. Li Xiantong stared at Luo Li with a complicated gaze, before turning towards Mu Chen and said, "I think that you might still not understand the exact situation you're in. Shen Songsheng and I had already investigated the three great generals. The both of us are able to resist two of them, with the final result being not a victory and not a defeat." Hearing his words, Mu Chen's eyes contracted. Not a victory and not a defeat. That meant that they would draw? According to the rules, we students have a slight advantage, which is to say that if we are able to achieve 3 draws, it would be our victory. Shen Sangsheng explained. With a slightly helpless smile, he continued, that also means that Li Xiantong and I would be able to guarantee 2 draws. At the same time, with our 2 draws, the critical point would be the 3rd fight. A grave shadow surfaced on Mu Chen's handsome, yet pale, face, while Luo Li faintly knitted her eyebrows. If you are able to achieve a draw in the 3rd fight, we would win. And, if you lose, we will all lose. The hunt this time would end here, and everyone would return with empty hands. Li Xiantong added indifferently. Mu Chen's face changed faintly upon hearing that. In other words, what he meant to say was that the pressure that was originally on all 3 of their shoulders had now been completely transferred onto Mu Chen's body. If he lost, he would have to endure the loss of all of their hopes. There might not be people who would criticize him. However, this kind of indescribable disappointment might lead to the collapse of one's self-confidence. This kind of conclusion seemed to be even more miserable than losing to Hi Yao. Losing to Hi Yao, he would still not be criticized by people. After all, it was a personal matter. However, if he lost at the final checkpoint, that would be equivalent to losing all the hopes and hard work of everyone. This responsibility was somewhat too heavy. Shen Sangsheng and Li Xiantong stared at the quiet Mu Chen. They had stopped their lecture, and quietly looked at him. This indescribable, yet tightly knotted atmosphere diffused out, before spreading throughout the entire stretch of the world. On the ground, countless people looked towards the few figures that had converged in the air. They were faintly able to understand what they were talking about, and this caused the expression on many people's faces to turn grave. Bringing anticipation in their eyes, they cast their gazes towards the figures in the sky that would bear the weight of their hopes and dreams. The fruits of bitter training they had endured would have to depend the performances of the few in the sky, who represent their greatest strength. The lovable faces of Su Ling'er, Su Xian and the rest had also turned grave. This spot seemed to be somewhat too heavy. Letting it drop on the shoulders of a youth that was still a freshman was slightly too cruel. Li Xiantong looked at Mu Chen a while before faintly moving his gaze while saying, if you feel that you are unable to bear the responsibility of this spot, you can give it up. I think there should be no one that has the qualifications to say anything about it. After all, you're still a freshman, as of now. There's no need to bear such stress and pressure. At this moment, Shen Sangsheng had also smiled. The wind tussled at his scattered hair, before he patted Mu Chen's shoulder. With a disdainful look in his eye that did not have the slightest degree of reducing, he said, there's no need for this much stress. What Li Xiantong said isn't wrong. I've almost forgotten that you're just a freshman. If you feel that you don't have the assurance, giving up is the best choice. Worst come to worst, I'll have to put out a little more effort and put my all in my fight against Senior Lin Zheng. As if I'm scared of him. Under this stifling silence propagating across the entire stretch of the world, Luo Li extended her tender and jade-like hand and gently held onto Mu Chen's palm. Looking at Mu Chen's forehead, which had faintly wrinkled, she gave a light smile. Even though everyone will be disappointed, you'll always be the most dazzling in my eyes. Mu Chen looked at Luo Li's exquisite face that was akin to porcelain, before faintly closing his eyes. The palm that held Luo Li's little hand gradually gripped tighter, before he suddenly opened his eyes. His black pupils had changed back to its previous sharpness and brilliance, with the hesitation within already completely removed. Raising his head, he cast his gaze towards the mountain peak that was covered in clouds. A smile rose from his handsome face as he spoke out in a gentle and soft voice, although I know that this will result in me bearing a lot of stress and pressure, giving up isn't my style. Furthermore, if I don't even have the courage to bear such pressure and stress, how will I be able to pursue the path to become the unrivaled expert? Saying those words, he turned his head towards the absolutely beautiful young girl with silver hair and dressed in jet black clothes. He had promised her that he would become an unrivaled expert and appear before her. He wanted to stand before her and completely shatter the pressure on her that was coming from all directions. If he was unable to muster the courage to endure the pressure present now, how would he be able to continue along the path of an unrivaled expert? Looking at the youth in front of them, whose imposing aura had started to rapidly rise with some astoundment. Shen Sangshan and Li Xiantong felt some astonishment. In the next moment, they could not resist and smiled as they thought, this Mu Chen truly is more reliable than Hi Yao. Mu Chen gave a smile as his gaze condensed on the cloud-covered mountain peak. Faintly, he could slightly discern the three figures that were akin to demon gods. The pressure coming from them was akin to Mount Tai pressing down on him. However, the smile on his face grew increasingly thick. These two seniors. Leave the third spot for me. Regardless of victory or defeat. Mu Chen's black eyes turned increasingly bright as he exclaimed with fervor. I'll give my all. The sky became progressively dim, however, the majestic spiritual light mountain became unusually lively. At this time, almost all of the students who had participated in the hunt had already rushed towards the place of the final battle. Everyone knew that this was the most important issue, as of now, and did not continue collecting spiritual lights. They had to guarantee the smooth pass of the final checkpoint. Only by passing through the three final protectors would they be able to obtain the benefits of the spiritual light empowerment. According to the rules, there was only one chance to challenge the three great protectors. Therefore, if they were to lose, all of the people within this year's hunt would return with empty hands, their year's worth of hard work down the drain. Being a fight of such a level, ordinary students were unable to get involved. Therefore, they could only cast their hopes on the three strongest people they knew. Although they knew that this would create an exceeding amount of pressure on them, this was, after all, the only thing they could do. On the small peak on the spiritual light mountain, Mu Chen sat cross-legged on the edge of the cliff. Looking at the seemingly endless sea of humans, he noticed the thick apprehension and anticipation within all of their eyes. The protectors this time were too strong. Even if Shen Sangshan and Li Xiantong were to collaborate, they knew that their chances of victory were still not high. Rustle. Soft footsteps rang out behind him, before Luo Li appeared beside Mu Chen. Taking a seat next to him, a faint smile appeared on her face as she asked, "Are you nervous?" Hearing her question, Mu Chen helplessly shrugged his shoulders. If it concerned him, alone, he would naturally have a single fluctuation of his state of mind. However, the hundreds and thousands of people below him had cast all their hopes on his shoulders. If he were to say that he was not nervous, that would be lying. Faintly panning his head over, he gazed at the absolutely beautiful face of the young girl, while a cherishing gaze erupted out from his eyes. He had only carried the weight of the students' hopes. However, what about Luo Li? She'll become the queen of the Luotian clan, and would carry the expectations of millions of citizens. She was their queen, and she would need to protect them. Were he to lose, it would only result in everyone here losing a year of their bitter training. However, if she were to lose, the citizens of the Luotian clan would be met with a cruel slaughter. The Luotian clan would turn into a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. That was the most bloody truth, and was something that cannot be changed. Compared to the burden of Luo Li, his was truly not worth mentioning. "Is it painful?" asked Mu Chen in a soft voice, extending his palm and gently caressing the young girl's cheek. Luo Li's soft and lovable face curled up within Mu Chen's bosom, as a peaceful smile surfaced on her absolutely beautiful face, gently shaking like a cicada. Mu Chen tightly hugged the young girl in his bosom. He knew that Luo Li possessed an extremely supple and strong character. Even with such pressure on her supple shoulders that would cause normal people to collapse and crumple, she would still carry it quietly by herself. However, this made people feel even more pain in their hearts. "Relax, I won't lose." Burying his face into that delicately fragrant hair of hers, he muttered to her. On another mountain peak, Shen Sangshan and Li Xiantong looked at the youth and the young girl snuggling together in the distance as the expression on their faces seemed somewhat different. "I truly don't know why the Academy would increase the difficulty level of the final protector to such a high level this year," Shen Sangshan said while pursing his lips. If the difficulty was set similarly to the previous years, he would be able to deal with it sufficiently by himself. However, the difficulty level had risen multiple times this year. The three great generals had come out. This was considered the first time such an occurrence happened in the past few years of the hunt. Only with stress would there be improvement. We can't just let you reveal your might and prestige every year, right? Replied Li Xiantong casually. Wait till I finish the spiritual light empowerment this time. It's about time to settle things with that fellow, Mo Longzi, said Shen Sangsheng with a laugh. While mentioning about Mo Longzi, a cold glint conspicuously appeared within his eyes. Is that fellow very strong? Asked Li Xiantong as his forehead faintly wrinkled. He hadn't crossed hands with Mo Longzi before. However, since the latter was able to make Shen Sangsheng return with empty hands, he was obviously not someone easy to deal with. Yes. Shen Sangsheng replied while nodding his head, then continued, after all, he's the genius nurtured wholeheartedly by the demonic Dragon Palace. Furthermore, he's also still not considered the strongest amongst the younger generation of the demonic Dragon Palace. That Mo Xingtian is even more terrifying. In a duel, even I might not be his opponent. Mo Xingtian muttering that name, Li Xuantong's eyes contracted. That was an extremely vicious person, who was number 1 on the bounty list. With regards to any Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy student, he represented an extreme amount of pressure. After this hunt, if you don't have anything going on, you can become a team with me and head out of the academy. At that time, we can try to see if we can deal with Mo Longzi and Mo Xingtian. Shen Sangsheng said with a smile as he extended his invitation out. Within the entire Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, the people who possessed the qualifications to let Shen Sangsheng extend his invitations weren't many. Li Xiantong felt slightly emotional. However, in the next instant, he raised his head and looked towards the majestic mountain peak while saying, we have to settle this problem in front of our eyes first. If we lose this spiritual light empowerment, the plan to destroy and kill would have to be postponed for some time. Shen Sangsheng nodded his head in approval, before turning his gaze towards the youth in the distance. For the final fight tomorrow, the pivotal key would be on Mu Chen. The night grew dimmer as the morning radiance split the cloud layers apart, illuminating the world once again. Under the spiritual light mountain, the atmosphere started to grow fiery, bit by bit, as countless scorching gazes looked towards the mountain peak. Whooshing sounds rang out in the air, before the crowd cast their scorching gazes towards the figures that appeared in the air, which were Shen Sangsheng, Li Xiantong, Mu Chen, and Luo Li. As Shen Sangsheng stood proudly in the air, he overlooked the sea of people on the ground, before slowly saying, I think everyone should know about the final rule of the hunt. This fight is extreme, and concerns the personal benefits of every one of us. However, I'll have to remind you that the 3 of us don't have an obligation to bear this role. Therefore, regardless of the result, we 3 will not hold any responsibility. If the result is not desirable, at that time, whoever feels they can bear the role can just stand up, and we'll give the position to them. Upon hearing his words, the entire stretch of the world turned deathly silent, as everyone quietly listened to him. Mu Chen sent an appreciative smile towards Shen Sangsheng. Mu Chen knew that he did this to take precautions against the possibility of him losing. At that time, there would be many people who would criticize him in disappointment. Although the ending has yet to be known, Mu Chen felt very grateful towards Shen Sangsheng's intentions. Senior brother Shen, please feel at ease. All of us won't take an inch and want a foot, and aren't discriminatory people. The 3 of you are the strongest amongst us. If even you 3 are defeated, we don't even have the qualifications to put up a contest. As for criticism, that is complete nonsense. I, Lu Hao, hereby say that even if we were to lose the final checkpoint, I'll absolutely respect the 3 of you, and would absolutely not feel resentment and indignation in my heart. Just as Shen Sangsheng's words rang out, a person from the crowd below immediately roared in reply. Yes. We ask the 3 of you to try your best. Even if you 3 were to lose, there isn't anything worse than that. Senior brothers Shen Sangsheng, Li Xiantong, and junior brother Mu Chen, good luck. Even if we lose, you 3 are the most formidable. The clear and resonant voices of young girls caused many echoes of agreement. Mu Chen looked towards sea of people, whose spirits were continuously on the rise, and gave a faint smile. Looking towards Shen Sangsheng and Li Xiantong, he said, seeing this, looks that there's no way for us to lose. It's good enough if you try your best. Shen Sangsheng and Li Xiantong both gave a smile. Raising their heads towards the majestic spiritual light mountain, Shen Sungsheng said, "Let's go and take a look at exactly what areas the three great generals of the punishment hall are standing at." As they said those words, he immediately shot forward. Transforming into a streak of light, he rushed towards the peak of the majestic mountain summit. Mu Chen, Li Xiantong, and Luo Li immediately followed closely behind him, with the sea of students similarly exploding forth. Covering the earth and hiding the sky, they swept towards the mountain peak akin to a swarm of locusts. This spectacle was exceedingly spectacular. As everyone within the hunting grounds headed towards the mountain peak, within the northern public square of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, disturbances started to occur. At this moment, the atmosphere was considered to have reached its peak within this half a month. Within the public square, countless scorching gazes converged towards the sky. Presently, there was a gigantic light screen, where clouds were shown within it. At this moment, they had started to become faint as the majestic mountain peak became faintly discernible as it started to appear. This change made everyone understand that the final fight of the hunt had already arrived. Exactly whether everyone would return empty-handed or having a rewarding journey would depend on this fight that would astonish the heavens and the earth. However, who exactly were the three strongest people that would represent all of the contestants? There naturally wasn't any need to talk about Shen Sungsheng and Li Xiantong. However, will the third person be a veteran influential figure, or a dark horse that had popped out of nowhere? Everyone was holding their breath in anticipation of this. Gazes converged towards the surface of the gigantic light screen. As the layers of clouds retreated, the scene present within finally became completely clear. The giant peak stood erect on the summit of the majestic spiritual light mountain. Akin to pillars that supported the sky, they pierced straight through the clouds. On the top of those three giant peaks, three figures quietly sat on the edge of the cliffs. As the mountain winds blew past, causing their clothes to flutter, an indescribable oppression started to quietly appear, enveloping the entire stretch of the world. Even the students outside of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy were able to feel some pressure. Those are the three great generals of the punishment hall? Such astonishing and imposing auras. They're undoubtedly the top three on the heavenly rankings. I'm afraid that they might all possess the strength of heavenly completion stage. That's truly terrifying. This final check truly is too difficult. With the three great generals protecting the pass, even with senior brother Shen and the rest, it would be difficult to pass through. The faces of countless students changed as they looked, with some respect, at the three statue-like figures sitting on the top of the mountain within the light screen. Anticipation could be faintly discernible from their eyes as they awaited the incoming fight, while thinking, that should be the highest level within our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, right? This truly made people feel anticipation. While everyone was waiting in anticipation, they were able to hear hurried whooshing sounds ringing out from within the gigantic light screen. They turned their attention over, only to see figures that hid the skies and covered the earth rushing forth through the lingering clouds akin to a swarm of locusts. Finally, floating in the air surrounding the mountain peak, the dense and numerous sea of humans seemingly had no end. They finally arrived. Quite a few people could hardly restrain their excitement as they hurriedly looked over. Under the attention of countless gazes, the sea of humans within the light screen rippled as three figures slowly swept across the gazes of the large crowd. The front two of them were not unexpected, which were predictably Shen Sungsheng and Li Xiantong. After a split second of resting on them, all of the gazes turned towards the last thin figure. As their gazes converged on the figure, the atmosphere within the northern public square seemed to have suddenly turned sluggish, since the mouths of countless people slowly dropped open. That's... Yi Qingling and the rest had opened their eyes wide as they looked towards the familiar figure, while thick disbelief erupted from within their eyes. Actually Mu Chen. At this instant, the entire northern public square was completely shaken. This video will end here.